If there's anything about being self-taught that has taught me about watercolor, I have learned that we tend to focus so much on steps that it prevents us from really thinking about how to use our tools. Today, I'm going to be talking with you about this issue of overworking. So the real issue about overworking is that sometimes we end up not maximizing the way we use our brush. Many of us have gone to school and we have been using our brush in a way where, we are essentially using just the tip and we're not maximizing the full use of the brush. Today, I want to show you how exactly we can use the brush such that you would understand the full potential to paint loose florals. This was actually done as an IG live, and the nice thing about IG is that you get to connect with your audience. But for YouTube, it's even better because you get to sit down with me and actually paint. I know that my YouTube friends are the serious ones, so grab your paints and join me as I share with you the background of how we're going to be breaking down this painting with the first layer just using brush strokes.
The way we hold our brush is going to impact the type of strokes that you are going to make. Now, the first thing is whenever we just use the tip of the brush and we create some of these small dabbing marks, even though it's a big brush, what happens is that we overwork that one spot. Now, being able to understand the full potential of your brush where you are adding pressure all around on the sides of the brush as well as the tip will help you to get really nice, big, broad, loose strokes. Don't be afraid to hold your brush slightly further away from the tip so that you can get some of those loose, broad strokes. I want to remind you that while you're watching me do this demo, it is not in real time. This means that I encourage you to take your time to really get to know your brush. Hold it slightly further away at different angles, push towards yourself, or even pull away. This is going to help you to understand how it feels like to paint. Now, I want you to again look into these dabbing marks and see how different it looks on the paper compared to using these full-bodied strokes. I want to take a moment to revisit some of the ways that we hold our brush that is not effective for loose florals. Resting your wrist on the paper and holding your brush like a pencil is not going to give you loose, broad strokes. I want you to try changing the way you hold your brush so that you are able to paint loose florals instead of drawing them out. Using dabbing marks tends to result in a lot more overworking because you are not using the full breadth of the brush. Now let's try holding your brush further up and not leaning your wrist on the paper. Instead, use your pinky finger to pivot so that you're better able to create strokes with your brush. Take your time to dance your brush across your page because painting is really about allowing all of these marks to come together and form your beautiful flower. I want you to remember your brush is not just a paint applicator, it's really a form of expression. So the way you hold it and express with it is going to give you that piece of art that you really want. So let go, let loose, hold your brush lightly, and remember to allow the brush to do the work for you.
So here is our paper, and I've got my sketchbook. It's 100% cotton paper. And here is where I want to share with you that the way in which we select our brushes is that one thing. But that being said, really, sometimes even if you're using a big brush, many of us are using our brushes wrongly. We are not using the full breadth of the brush. As a result, you end up just using, well, parts of the brush over here, which is not sufficient. You want to use the whole brush with the pressure and all of that. So we're going to demonstrate that. So let's start off by spraying down our paints. So over here, I've got my paints that are on a ceramic palette. I am using a size 12 round brush, and just to remind you, maybe you might be using a size that is bigger, but it might not appear as big. So I want to let you know that different brands actually give you different, well, sizes, and it is not always universal. So with your brush, make sure that you don't have it too wet. Tap off that excess and grab your paint color. So I'm just going to be getting whatever leftover colors I have here on my dirty palette, which, by the way, I love. Dirty palettes are good because, well, it helps you to really just learn to make messes, right? So let me just start off by doing this. Now, sometimes overworked paintings look like this because many of us use a lot of dabbing marks. This is what I mean by dabbing marks, and this is something that I noticed also in Brush and Bloom Retreat that happened last year. Dabbing marks appear when you are just making small finger-like movements. And when you do small finger-like movements, even though you're pressing on the brush, you are actually lifting a lot. Now, this is my challenge to you. Today, in order for you to prevent overworking, I want you to focus on using the entirety of your brush. Try and see how to create a loose floral using as little strokes as you possibly can. Right now I'm at 4 strokes, 5, 6, 7. There we have a loose flower. And move and lift. You can really capture a lot more. Now, another thing I want you to think about when you are painting is with the dabbing strokes. What happens is that when you're lifting a lot and constantly pressing on your paper, you are also going to be getting a lot more irritation on your cotton fiber, which is your paper, and as a result, it's going to look overworked. And here is where I want to showcase to you how to use your brush in a way where we are going to use as little strokes as possible to help you to create loose florals. And what you can see is really, I am just using the pressure of my brush, slowly creating petals. And play around with the direction and how exactly you press and move around with it. Try to use more C curves, so this is going to help you to overcome that overworked look. Now let's go on to the next part where we are now going to inject in different color just to play around with our composition, noticing I'm using the side of my brush, and you can see with one stroke I can actually create such big, beautiful, loose strokes. You don't need to dab and use so many small strokes. In fact, that's where you get to the details. Now, your job today is really just to focus on that big, broad stroke. So you can see, like in terms of the number of strokes that I'm using, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 strokes in this one flower. Now, I don't want you to use more than that because what we want to do again is we're trying to create more looseness. And while it's still wet, this is a great time for us to charge in paint. So use your hand movement to kind of move around with your painting. Now let's play with this composition a little bit more. And we're going to add in a little bit of green now, just around here, just to create some of these leaves. And you can see that I'm just using my brush to guide me, the tip of my brush, using the full brush, and you're really focusing on what it can do, the marks that it can make, instead of trying to replicate specific petals. Then that's when you get really stuck in the details. And when we get stuck in the details, this is when you start doing the funny things with the brush, which is, try and over brush the entire thing. Keep on going over parts over and over again. Let the paint settle down so that you don't get that overworked feeling. Now, with every composition, take your time to kind of figure out what works for you. Using the tip of my brush, I just put in some marks for my center. I'm going to do the same for here, but again, using as little brush strokes as you can. So you can see, if I'm going to count the number of brush strokes that I've used so far, it wouldn't get to 20. And if you have been using dabbing marks like this and constantly using small little wrist flicks to create your flowers, then you're not going to get looseness. Use the whole brush. Move with it so that you can really start to see what you can do and how you can do it. Sometimes it also helps to stand up. So I hope that this actually helps you to begin thinking about ways in which you can play around with your painting. Now, I have to tell you, I am a wet and wet gal. I love my paintings to be nice and wet and fluid, so I've just sprayed my painting. It's going wild now because there are areas in my painting that are still wet and they are flowing because that's how watercolor works. This is where the magic happens because again, we are making marks. We are showcasing to the viewer there is going to be a difference in edges. So these are hard-edged and these are soft-edged. So we are playing again with the viewer, giving them the opportunity to kind of fill in the gaps, And while all of this is happening, the magic is happening, don't feel like you have to fill in all of the gaps. Now, while this is still wet, I want you to pay attention to areas that have dried in your painting. So there's a lot of multitasking that's happening in your painting. I want you to now put down. So I'm just going to show you how I'm going to add some layers. And as you can see, again, minimal strokes. We want minimal strokes to help you to maximize the feeling inside your painting. Let me know how your thoughts are. We just painted all of this in one layer. Of course, it's going to take time for my painting to dry. But hopefully, this actually demonstrates to you that in order for you to paint, you need to select a good brush and use your brush fully with the pressure and everything so you don't focus on just the details. We want to really capture broad strokes and not the dabbing marks. And as you can see, after these guys have started to dry, what has happened is that it's left with some of these hard lines. And some of these hard lines have actually created, well, it looks a lot more flat, doesn't it, in comparison to this. So apart from your brush strokes, the next thing you want to think about is color values. And you can see varying your color values, meaning areas that have more water is going to, show light because it's a lot more transparent. So there's so many things for you to think about. I am loving some of these things that are happening here. So just so you can see, all of these beautiful edges that are kind of forming the softness. This is how you're actually going to create a composition that's a lot more dynamic and also does not have your dabbing marks, which could result in your overworking. Now, if you have not been painting with a large brush, your small brush is only better for details and also maybe for your stems and things like that, which tends to be what I like to use it for. So this is where, drawing out some of your stems and things like that might be a bit easier with your small brush. But even then, I want you to watch how I manipulate it. I am not using dabbing marks. I'm pressing down and I'm using the full breadth of the mark. If there is anything you have learned from today's session, the brush choice is so important, but it's just not about the brush that you choose, but also how you use it. Now, overworking really comes from overthinking. That's the deep-rooted issue. I want you to learn to trust your tools, trust yourself, and trust your ability to move with the tools that you are choosing. And obviously, the smaller brushes, well, I'm not saying that they don't have a use, but I always see my tools as a funnel. You want to start off with your big shapes first, and then slowly get down to the nitty details. It's the same with everything in life, really. We always start with the big picture. So when you're painting loose florals next time, and you really want to avoid overworking, remember the big details, the big strokes, and the full potential of the tools that you are using. I can't wait for you to check out the next episode because I am going to be working on the same painting, and this time we are going to go into the second layer of the painting, talking to you about the next issue around overworking, which is color.